How can past lives show you which loops have you been repeating for the longest period of time? And to recognize these loops are extremely important, because if you do not recognize them, they will keep coming back in your current life and in your upcoming lives until you recognize them and you heal the one that has to be healed. And at the very end of this video, I'm going to explain a very interesting concept, and it's going to be the clearing out your heart. That means nothing more that this duality that exists in your heart is going to cease to exist, in a sense, so it can pull together the two separate parts of your heart that you didn't even know are separate. I gained all of this knowledge by going through a lot of pain and also looking into my past lives. I'm going to start with my newest one, my newest past life that I started to look into, because it gave me such a deep insight. It gave me such a deep pattern recognition that helped me seeing through my current life as well. So all I know about this person, I didn't get emotional memories yet. This is going to be very important later on, that I will have the ability to feel the emotional part as well. But so far I only get visuals and I get information about that life to a certain degree. And the information I received in the very beginning, that this was a person who broke my heart, and it was the very first experience with him, and it was so profound that in any other life I could recognize his energy. I rejected him. So this is somehow my negative experience created his negative experience as well. And what we have to know is that energies are supposed to integrate, but in this scenario it cannot. And that's why it's important to look into past lives, or even the past within your own life, to revisit those memories and see it with a fresh eye, basically. And the other reason we have to look at it is that we have to recognize if we have been repeating it, or if it has been already been repeating. And this is what I found, that all of these people I met in this life, I didn't see a pattern in between them. And when I saw this specific life as well, I could see the exact pattern. And when we talk about patterns, the most important thing we have to pay attention to is the subconscious or unconscious attraction that comes naturally, and it comes really strongly. This is how your subconscious is trying to show you something, trying to take you back to the exact same scenario, giving you another chance to revisit, rethink the same thing, and come up with a completely different conclusion, act differently, help you to integrate those memories in a different way. And when I looked into this life, the reason he broke my heart, because this is something I didn't know only when I started to gain memories, that he was a player. So he was never really serious about me, but I was unaware of that, or maybe I didn't want to accept it. Maybe it was visible. I don't know this part yet, but this is where I would say the first hurt came. And when I looked back throughout my own life, the current one, I could see the exact same thing happening as well. And it actually happened with 3 completely different people. First, I believed it was just my two twin flame connections, but then I recognized that there was actually another one who matched this exact same pattern. And this very first person in my life, I was, I think, 19 or 20, I can't even remember. But I remember I met this guy And I could feel, back then I was a fearful avoidant, a person who is very suspicious, doesn't really trust people, and is connected to the head. So basically you can have a lot of control over your own emotions. And I remember when I met this guy, I felt this weird thought, or this thought came to me, and it was so in the very, very beginning, that if I would kiss this guy, I would definitely fall in love. And that was the exact reason I rejected him, because I couldn't give up such a control to one person over myself, because that was the biggest fear in my life back then, that I do not want anyone to have such a control over me, because it's too risky. And later on, several years later, that's kind of crazy, that person became my colleague, and it turned out that he was like this serial cheater. He was a married person, but he was just messing around with everyone. But this was something that it really felt disgusting. So back then it didn't mean what I felt or how I felt or how my emotional part reacted to anyone. My mind always overrode my heart. But I do remember that extreme chemistry, even without anything happening in between us. That was something that I could really clearly recall. And later on, around age 27, I got really disappointed in life, in the way I live my life. I felt very, very lonely, and I thought I followed all the rules that came from society, all that wisdom, but I feel miserable. So something is wrong. So I started going against myself and against social norms, and I started changing rapidly. And this is exactly the time when I was going through this mental change, and also my characteristics started to change. This person who was my very, very first twin flame. So you can recognize the twin flame when you feel this instant connection. You don't even see the person, you just feel that you are energetically connected, and that's it. It's done. It's already in process. And this is a relationship that I got involved in. It's not really the point. I changed a lot. I recognized a lot of things that I had to deny, and it really humbled me. That relationship really shifted the way I saw reality and I saw myself. And that person was actually also a player. He had a lot of affairs throughout his life. He wasn't a serious guy. But at that point, it didn't really matter to me, to be honest, because I was in a relationship myself, but I was at the very end. I didn't really know what to do. That was basically a really weak decision from me. But if I didn't make the decision, I wouldn't have changed. And that person was in a relationship as well. So I never really got emotionally connected to that degree that I could do in the upcoming relationship, who was also a twin flame connection. And with that person, I didn't know he was a player, to be honest. And by the time I recognized that he was just messing around within his life, before he met me and he was in a relationship, by the time I recognized what was going on, unfortunately, I was too emotionally connected. I couldn't get out. By the time I moved from my head fully in the body, and all my decisions were made by my heart, I lost total control over myself. So this is a deeper underlying thing that I have to work on. I just started working on to think about it, why this could happen. But this is something that we also have to understand, that so many times we try to understand things as a psychologist, but there is a different explanation for for that, and this is what I'm going to explain, and it's so interesting. And it also explains the many lives we have to go through. So with this last relationship, who was also a twin flame connection, I met him, it's going to be 10 years ago, this New Year's Eve. He was a similar energy to that very energy I lived over 100, 200 lifetimes together with. So this is where the anxious preoccupied is, and when we see the polyvagal theory or the vagus nerve, this is at the back of the body. And this is what is dominant, that the energy comes from the body to the head. And this means that when you process this part, you will get fully connected to your heart. This person who mirrors you in that heart part, you will feel like it's connected to your core. You can never experience a deeper connection than that. But what truly happens is, it's actually a representation how that part of the nervous system was created for you, because we always take everything granted, that okay, this is just what evolution made, but this is how you start to remember how it was made for you. Because when I think back, the person I lived so many lifetimes together with, he wasn't a player. So here actually this twin flame connection shows me two different loops, and the loop here I had to overcome, because this is the attachment, and this is a survival skill, this is an instinct, this is where you feel loved, you have the ability to feel loved, and you love as well. And I had that, and I couldn't understand why I had to go through this when I have already did that. And the answer to that the opposite of that, so the other part of the heart on the front, you have the detachment. This is the opposite of attachment, which is also a survival skill, because if you get too stuck in the attachment type basically, and for example you use a partner, and this is exactly what happened to me in those lives, you commit suicide because you are so deeply in love with that person. You can't imagine your life outside of that love. You are unable to love anyone ever again, and that is a problem. And that's why in this life, the twin flame connection I had, he represented this detached version of living reality. And this is exactly what I had to recall. I had to teach this part of the nervous system, which means you have to let go, which I was unable to do with that specific energy. And that's the key, that maybe you are able to detach from many people, but the problem is that you have to detach from that specific one, because this is the most difficult for you. And this is when you teach that part of your nervous system which can naturally attach, that it can also detach. And when you have this duality, that's when you get a Kundalini awakening, which I had. And now when we go to the front of the body, from this I recognized what is happening here. The problem is that everything comes from the head and comes down to the heart. And it's the opposite of that. You are detached, and you have to bring the attachment here. And basically you teach this part to be able to equally attach, but you are able to also detach. And to do that, you have to recall really painful memories. And for this part of the nervous system, this is the biggest fear. So there is a lot of self-development in order to dig down into your own pain, because here it's automatic. Everything comes from the emotion up to the head, and the difficulty is getting into the head. And here it's the opposite, that you're very easily in your head, but getting to the depth of your emotions is going to be the difficulty. and you have this duality on the front integrated, which means equal, is going to be the goal. And this is where the interesting thing is going to happen, because as soon as you have these two parts, that and the back of the body, you have the attachment and the detachment equally, and on the front of the body you have the detachment and the attachment equally as well. These two are going to pull together, and this is what it means, that your heart is going to be cleared, your heart is going to pull together. And that's why it's important to look into your past, because you can get directions, you can get a guidance where to go, what to do. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it's important to see that. And this is when you also recognize that you can't take it personally, because this part of the nervous system had to be created as well, where you feel hurt, and because you feel hurt you can't trust. But the reality is someone had to create it for you, and you had to create it for someone, because this is a survival skill as well. So if you realize that what we truly experience is that everyone had exactly the same experience, we can call it the collective unconscious. The only difference is who did it to you and who you did it to. But it had to be created, and when you get to the very, very core, you are going to meet your own creator. But the reality is that you created that person as well. So this was just a very interesting food for thought. I hope this video was helpful for you, and see you in my next video.